welcome to the first episode in this series where I share with you how I'm building my new N-scale switching layout. In this episode, I'm going to talk about building the frame, and this frame you're going to see is very customized to the space that I have available for it. Now this room used to be my home office. It measures 5 foot wide on this side, and then it's 9 foot on this side. It has a nice window with a view, but it was a great home office when I only spent an hour or two a day in here on some days of the week. When I started spending 12 hours a day in here, 6 to 7 days a week, it became, not so great. And right now the room is an absolute disaster area. It's going through a transition period. If you watched my 12 Days of N-Scale series, this is the temporary setup that I used to film it on. And if you saw day 12, you'll know that that was the day I unveiled my new layout. And because I'm filming this stuff out of order, at the time you saw it, it already had some track on it that was operational. But as of the day I'm filming it here, it only has the framework done, and that's what I want to talk about today. Basically what happened is these bookshelves used to literally be full of business books, computer books, writing books, lots of big, heavy, weighty books, and when I moved my home office to another room, the books all went with it, and I was left with, if you could believe it at the time, some empty shelves. And then I started rearranging things, and well, they quickly got cluttered up with everything. But while they were empty, I started thinking, man, there's got to be a way to fit some trains in here. And of course, being an N-scaler, that became a lot more doable. So I started researching shelf layouts and switching layouts and found a design that I really loved and that I could easily modify to be even better. And I'll talk more about that track plan in episode 3. Although if you've watched day 12 of my 12 Days of N-Scale series, you will have already seen it. So I was lucky when I started this project. I already had a lot of the infrastructure in place for it. When I moved into this house, it already had these vertical brackets in place on the wall. There's 3 of them. And I had gotten a huge box of shelf supports, all different kinds, from a friend when she moved many years ago. And I decided to use these ones. They're very heavy duty, they're very sturdy, and they actually screw into place to keep them. You can see before you tighten them down, they're pretty wobbly. But when you tighten down those screws, these become pretty solid. And the only reason I had put in smaller shelves when I used this as a home office was, A, that was what I had on hand from a prior move, and B, when I came in this doorway, I didn't really relish the idea of walking straight into the corner of a shelf, hence why this support really never got used. However, with this layout, I'm going to use the full width of this wall. So I'm going to start with what I had to do to build the framework. And if you were going to build this for yourself, it would probably be a lot simpler than what I did, but the basis of this is an outer frame that's made of 1x3 wood. This is just your standard pine wood, purchased at Lowe's. It's nothing fancy. I did make a point of picking out pieces that were not warped and didn't have any big missing knots or other unsightly features, so it looks pretty good. So the exterior framing was really pretty simple. I didn't do anything fancy at the corners. I just basically cut the pieces, and there's 2 screws fastening everything, including this end here. Now the reason for this angle, this is purely a cosmetic piece. I had installed this cat force field. Most of you will know this as a door. Thank you, Nick from Nick's Crossing, for naming it the cat force field. That gives me a good chuckle every time I look at it, especially considering some of the difficulties I had getting it installed. Because of this tight space, I went with a bifold door, which was really about the only way that I could put a door on this room. And if I back up, this view is probably a little dark because I'm in the hallway. You can see that as you come in, I didn't want to snag myself on a sharp corner, which I almost certainly would have done many, many times. This kind of just helps ease the transition into the room. So to make that cosmetic piece, I did have to put these pieces in as the structural members. This is really what's holding this corner together. This piece is literally just glued in. You can see that I haven't done anything with the screws there. And if I had this to do over again, I would have used the circular saw to put a 22.5-degree miter on each of these pieces, so it would have come together a little nicer, but it really doesn't matter because I anticipate the scenery kind of overlapping this frame, whether it's going to be fully or partially, I don't know. It's probably going to be fully if I put the fascia board on it, so that's not really going to matter. And being a newcomer to using a circular saw, I did what was easy. Now the reason these internal members, well, for one, the reason they even exist, let's start with that. If you were going to build this and put it on a tabletop, you would not need these internal members. And these are made of 1x2s, and they're literally their only purpose is to catch the supports for my shelves. I mean, these, as I mentioned, I already had, and I wanted to use them. And this allowed me to build a deeper framework that cantilevered out a little bit beyond those supports, but was still able to catch them. These members here, I just wanted to give the frame a little more rigidity. Hence why I have these two members and then the three running across. Now, I'm not a professional builder, I just play one on YouTube, but I've watched some actual professional builders since I built this one, and I've learned some techniques. Haven't tried them yet, but I've learned some techniques for using a circular saw to notch wood members, where I could have, if I had this to do again, I would have done just one piece as a straight run, and then notched them at these intersections just to make a cleaner, easier build. The main reason this one here is set back, it's because once I screwed one in, how would you get to the other end? So again, this is a learning project for me. It's certainly not the perfect way to build it. But then the other reason that these are 1x2s, as are these blocking pieces back here, you're going to see in the next video, what this does is it forms a recessed area that I can just lay in 1 inch of foam, and the foam will be flush with the outer frame. So, and that's the only purpose of these blocks here. These are just glued into place, and you'll see in the next video, the purpose of them is just to provide a ledge for gluing the foam. The foam will also be glued to these members here. And these intermediate ones are just because that's where there's going to be a seam between the pieces of foam that I cut. That'll make more sense in the next video. So a few other finishing touches to this, and this is again unique to my specific situation. I did put in this leveling screw, and what that screw does is it just sits right on top of that support. I had used the level app on my iPhone to make sure that this was level. This frame itself, being a newcomer to woodworking, is a little bit out of square, not much, but a little bit. And I'm sure that the supports for the shelving are not perfectly level either. I mean, again, they're close, but when you're building something, it's all of these cumulative things that make the end result be not level. And then the other thing I've done, because I do envision this layout being portable, that maybe I take it out to the garage in better weather to do some of the work out there. Maybe I take it to train shows or YouTube meetups. So I put these T-nuts in, and I have the leveling legs out in the garage. These T-nuts allow me to screw in the leveling feet should I want to operate this somewhere outside of this room. And again, you know, this is a learning project, and if I had it to do over, the size I used on these were way too big. I had to drill a 3/8 inch hole to mount these, and when you consider that these 1x3s are only 3/4 inches wide. I did have some issues. You could probably see where it split the wood a little bit. And I did reinforce that with wood glue. But I had bought those pieces initially to use with 2x4s on the layout that I'm going to build upstairs eventually. So if I had to do this one over again, I would have bought the smaller size leveling feet, which only require a 1/4 inch hole. And the last thing I would do different, and I may still go ahead and do some modifications to this, is I would have gotten a drill bit that let me drill the countersink for these screws. Right now they stick out a bit from the face of the frame. I'm not hugely worried about it for now because I haven't decided yet whether I'm going to finish this by painting it or whether I'm going to put in a fascia board. And I have also, if you're wondering why there is a little bit of a gap to these frame members, is I did want to leave room for a fascia board on the back, particularly because the foam board for the scenery and the back is going to come up higher than the exterior framing. And so I'm going to want something to close that off. That said, I may need the screws to be flush so that I can install the fascia board. I just don't know yet. The overall size of this frame is 13 inches deep by 4'10", which is 58 inches wide. And I probably could have squeezed another inch out of this, but I didn't want to get it too tight to the trim, and I wanted to leave some room around it should I decide to put a fascia board. So all in all, given that I'm a novice with working with a circular saw, and I've never really done a whole lot of woodworking in general, I'm pretty happy with how this turned out. I am going to be installing some battery-powered LED lighting underneath this shelf so that I'll be able to see better what's going on this side of the layout. What I haven't decided yet is where I'm going to install the controls. I have bought, being that it's a switching layout, I have bought these electric switches. This whole layout is going to be Kato Unitrack. I had originally envisioned putting these switches like flush with the face of the frame, but with the electrical connectors projecting out, that's not really going to be the easiest thing unless I really hack a big slot through this frame. So most likely what I'm going to do is build some kind of support platform that falls a little bit below it. Most likely I will be using this Kato power pack that came with my starter set that I bought last year. And it turns out I never knew until recently what those connectors on the side were for. They're to allow these switches to plug into it. So you can connect a whole bunch of these in a row. The first switch connects to the power pack, and then each additional switch connects to the one before it. So as I've said a bunch of times already, this is very much a learning experience for me. In fact, that's why I'm doing this small layout now. In many ways, it's a learning experience before I build a significantly bigger one upstairs. And if all goes well, and here I am always getting ahead of myself with projects, but there's definitely room to put a second one above here and still be able to reach it and operate it at a good eye level. And I might do that. I actually have an idea for a track plan for it. It would have a little bit of a different feel than this one, but I would basically build the same frame, same dimensions, but I'd incorporate all those things I learned along the way to make it even better. And I'm not going to say right now that I am going to do that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But it's nice to know that I have the space and the ability to do that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode on how to do the framework for a simple switching shelf layout. And in the next episode, I'm going to show you how I cut the foam and fastened it in place to form the base for all of my track and all of my scenery. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll tune in for future episodes to see how this layout takes shape. So after I'm done using this temporary holiday layout, I am going to dismantle this. I already have plans to build what I'm calling an upper deck, which will be shelving to go on this desk that's going to support my 3D printers and Cricut cutting machine. And I'm sure I'll be sharing a series of videos with you for that, but that's basically going to be the new purpose of this room. It's a combination of 3D printing and model trains.